Hello and welcome back to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at d1baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Mark Etheridge. We are here to recap the first weekend of SEC play, which delivered. I mentioned on my Saturday edition of Weekend Waypoints, the morning after opening day for conference play, that every year I kind of have to remind myself that, to use a metaphor that maybe I shouldn't use, but like the bullets start flying on Friday and then it's so hard to keep up with everything. And, you get used to it. But like that first day, because we've been spoiled in non-conference play in this way, not in many other ways, but that games start at noon, they start at 3, they start at 7. So like they're nice and spaced out. Well, that stops once we get to conference play. And on Friday, pretty much everybody starts between 6 and 7:30 Eastern. And so, that there's all the games are happening at once, and you just kind of have to get adjusted to that. So there was a lot going on. We will cover it to the best of our abilities. Mark was at some games this weekend. I was at home kind of trying to monitor as much as I could. So hopefully between the two of us, we've got some good perspective of opening weekend. But before we get to any of that, I have to remind you that this episode of Highway to Hoover and every episode of Highway to Hoover this season is brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Get ready for a new season of fishing fun with Academy Sports and Outdoors and reel in the best gear at low prices every day. Plus, Academy offers easy ways to shop and save time, like free 1-hour in-store or curbside pickup on academy.com orders. All right, Mark. First of all, you've been in the car a lot the last few days. Yeah. I've introduced, last episode we introduced your long excursion that you are on. Mercifully, you're getting a day without a game tomorrow, so that'll be nice. But how are you feeling? Let's check in 3 days in, Mark. How are you? How are you feeling? How are things separate from the games? We'll talk about the games later. Yeah. How are you feeling? How are things going through 3 days?
I tell you what, the first day, so I live in Mobile. I'm going to Knoxville, and I go pick up my rental car, and it takes, I don't know, close to an hour to get my rental car. Oof. And then they don't have the SUV, the small SUV that I ordered, and I'm in I won't say the brand, but a really small car. Okay. And I am not a really small man. So that has not helped, spending all that time in the car. And then I hit traffic, I hit Birmingham and then in Chattanooga, and I roll in for a 6:30 first pitch. I thought I was going to be there around 5 based on when I left. And I roll in there at 6:15, and I'm trying to park and trying to, get in. And of course the stadium's under construction. So, you're disoriented. You're trying to find your way in, and nothing's where it's supposed to be. But I got there, and I was in my seat for first pitch, thankfully. So, hey, it's all good. Right. And let me tell you about Tennessee, right? I mean, with what they're doing with that ballpark, I mean, it's already really cool, and it's a construction zone. Okay. So once they finish it, the atmosphere is already incredible, but it's going to be great. But, that game was, and I'll segue a little bit, but that game was really well played. Liam Doyle, Liam Peterson, Nate Snead came in at the end and was really good. Luke McNeely for Florida was also really good. It was just it was like a postseason game, absolutely. And Tennessee won it, and I felt fine. And then I woke up the next morning, and all that stiffness from being in the car for that long in the same position I'm not used to that, dude. I mean, I was like, and then I had another drive. So then I'm driving the 4 hours from Knoxville to Athens, and I get out in Athens, and I'm like, oh gosh, I'm like a mummy, trying to walk up steps, and hopefully this is going to get better, because I did feel a little better, for the third day driving from Athens to Columbia. Not as far, but it was about 3 hours ish. So I'm feeling better today, and then I've got kind of a slow day tomorrow. I'm going to spend the night in Birmingham so I can be ready for the double header, basically, the 2-city double header, one at Rickwood and then the other in Tuscaloosa. So I'm really fired up about that. But it's been cool just seeing the different atmospheres within the stadium. Georgia, they're farther along, with their ballpark renovation. It's maybe a year or so ahead from where Tennessee is, and it's transformed. It's a much more, there's much more energy. It's a better atmosphere than certainly the last time I was there, and it's just more fan friendly. And then you look at Georgia, and they're a fun team anyway. I mean, they hit a bunch of home runs and strike a bunch of people out, and they're good. And I mean, there's a lot, there's a lot of things anyway, right? And now you have the ballpark that kind of lives up to that as well. So it was good. And then, today at Founders Park, first time I've been there in maybe a decade. It's been a while, and it's just such a pretty park. It's just so classically done. It feels like baseball, right? As soon as you walk in, it's there. And, if South Carolina gets to rolling again, it could be, it could rival the atmospheres that, the other places, but it wasn't this weekend, or at least the day I was there. Of course, the weather wasn't great, and it was raining part of the day and all that good stuff too. But yeah, Tennessee, that was incredible atmosphere. They were into every pitch. I mean, it was postseason like, and we're in mid-March. And then Georgia was a step behind that, but certainly, an impressive venue, and the fan base is really getting behind that program.
Yeah, I've always, none of that really surprises me. Tennessee's always, I've compared it maybe on this podcast, but I forget if it's here or on a radio hit or wherever. I talk in a lot of places. It's as close as we have in college baseball to like a South American soccer match, just in terms of like, just the fans from like pitch one through the last out are just like jacked up, like just totally on 11 the entire time. And it's great. It's a wonderful atmosphere. It's one of my favorite places, and perhaps my single favorite place to cover a game, just because the energy is up the entire time. So none of that really surprises me. And I will say, South Carolina, I think sometimes it's easy to, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but it's easy to kind of dump on them in terms of atmosphere. And maybe some of that is fair sometimes. I don't know. I'm not there often enough. I'm there a couple times a year, right? But I think what works against them is the stadium itself is physically large.
Yeah.
So like the concourses are wide. You can walk the whole way around the stadium. There's like a huge concourse behind the batter's eye where they keep the national title trophies. And so like people are just everywhere. Like there could be 8,000 people there, but they're so spread out.
Yeah, it's a good point.
I feel like it does take away a little bit from just the noise, because they have people that are, people standing, people sitting, people, roaming around. So it, which I think is one of the things that, by the way, the renovations to, as Runes calls it, Leslie, or was that you, Leslie Nielsen Stadium? Was that you that did that? Our internal chat, Leslie Nielsen Stadium. The renovations to Lindsey Nelson Stadium. So you have to be careful now, because I'm going to start calling it Leslie Nielsen when I don't mean to. Lindsey Nelson Stadium are much needed. I'm not arguing against it, but I do wonder if, when it's just a little nicer than what it was before, if you do lose some of the atmosphere,
lose some of the edge.
Yeah, and that happens all the time. Like I growing up where I did in East Texas, like I went to A&M games at Old Olson Field, and the atmosphere there is better than what it is now at Bluebell Park. I think that's just a tale as old as time, that, when the facilities get nicer, you lose some of that edge because there's more to focus on. In some of these places, all you had was the baseball. So you just kind of focused on the baseball. So anyway, we can leave that there as we get into the actual games themselves. And speaking of Tennessee and Leslie Nielsen Stadium, they swept Florida, and impressively so. I thought. I'll echo your sentiment. I watched basically every pitch of the Friday game, and I thought, I called it the game of the night the next morning, and it wasn't even the closest one, right? Like we had 1-run games, we had, Alabama, Texas A&M came down to the wire, and yet just the quality of play between Florida and Tennessee was such that I was more compelled by that than I was some of these 1-run games. So I echo all of that. And I think the pitchers battled. It wasn't their best starts, but I think based on the quality of the lineups they were facing, I thought they pitched well. I also thought, conversely, like even as Liam Doyle, for example, was collecting outs pretty quickly, like I thought Florida did a good job against him. Like,
Mhm.
they were good at bats. They were making him work. Brody Donay saw about 40 pitches, it felt like, in 3 at bats or whatever it was. So long story short, like the Friday game just blew me away. And it gave me one of those moments of like the college game. I'm sure you appreciate this, having covered it as long as you have. The college game has come a long way.
Yeah.
It's always been a compelling product, but now I'm not a scout, so I can't really tell you, but were there a dozen big leaguers on the field, like, or in the dugouts, like maybe. And that's just kind of where we're at in college baseball. And I just think that's beautiful, that we get to see that kind of thing. So we could talk about games 2 and 3 as well, but because obviously it's a comprehensive sweep for Tennessee, but I was just blown away by the quality on the field.
Yeah. It was one of those games that will stick with me. Okay. And you can appreciate this. You go to a ton of games, and a lot of them, after you write the story, you might remember a player, you might remember a play, but they start to blend together. And with the way that atmosphere was, with the way the pitchers were on the mound, with the velocity, it was just different. It was different, and it reminded me of like some of the LSU games with Skeens, a Hagen Smith Arkansas game, when you got that level of pitchers and they're facing the kind of competition that can challenge them, and that's why we do this, right? Those kinds of moments, and I felt like, when I was watching, is sitting there, I was really glad, one, that I had driven 4,000 miles up here, but 2, just that I was able to find, pick the right game in order to see that out of all, because it could have been the Saturday, it could have been the Sunday game. And while they would have been interesting and fun, it's baseball, we like it. It wasn't like it was Friday. And I felt like it was just kind of really cool. And I came away impressed with Florida. Now, I didn't see them Saturday or Sunday. I don't, I understand kind of what happened just from Saturday. As soon as Aiden King left, so did Florida. But I feel like I was impressed with what if they wouldn't have been playing, first round draft pick pitchers on the road at the soon to be number 1 team in the nation. I think they would have beat a lot of teams, and they're going to sit there 0-3 and feeling really down about their prospects. But I think that's a good team. So we'll see. We'll see how things shake out. But really impressed with the balls. I mean, just that lineup there, unforgiving. You can make 3-4 good pitches in a row and they'll spoil them, and then you make one not as good and it's in the gap. And it's just they're unrelenting. And then you have all those arms as well. So it's they won it all last year, and heck, if they're not the favorite to win it all again this year.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at with Tennessee as well. And I think it says something about how dangerous the Tennessee lineup is, how many runs I think they can score this season, that I came away from a series in which Florida got swept and in one game gave up, whatever it was, 10 runs. Mm-hmm. Thinking like, could have been worse, yeah. Like it really did feel like that could have gone a lot worse. Like I think Florida did okay in some ways. So I'm kind of generally with you. 2 things though. One is on Florida quickly. You're right that in the game 2, Aiden King was fabulous. And then the minute he left, things, they went to hell to put it bluntly. Right. And I think that is where we see how them being banged up expresses itself. Because in a different scenario, Coppola starts that game, and maybe it doesn't go as well, but then you could go to King, and maybe he goes a little longer, and then maybe that's all you need. Whereas here, you start with King, and then you got to find somebody else. And so that's kind of where the dominoes start to kind of fall when you're banged up. And the other thing is that I was going to bring up is welcome to the SEC, Marcus Phillips. Complete 7-inning complete game shutout in game 2. I was curious. I'm not going to say I'm skeptical, because like I refuse to be skeptical about anything Tennessee pitching wise because of Frank Anderson's presence. But I was curious to see what Marcus Phillips would look like as a starter. because last year he was a in parentheses, very short reliever where it was like one batter, two batters. Hey, we need a punch out. Let's go to Marcus Phillips. Obviously they're asking him to do something very different this season. And he was great on Saturday. So we'll see. Let's, week after week's a different deal, but I don't see how you could come away anything but super impressed by how he looked in that outing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like, that was I guess a surprise for us. Certainly heading into the season, we did not see him in that starting role, and certainly not as a dominant starter the way he was Saturday. And if this is who he is going forward, or even close to this, man, it's gonna be hard to beat them. You just hope that you can win Sunday, right, and outscore them, because I really feel like, that with the way that they've got Snead behind, Doyle on Friday, that's going to be a problem for everybody.
Agreed. Yes. In short, agreed. Let's move on to Kentucky and Georgia, Mark. It feels like in some ways Georgia kind of got away with one this weekend. And by that, I mean, their pitching problems cropped up again. A lot of command issues. Okay, they gave up some home runs, but at Foley Field, that's going to happen. It was just that Kentucky just didn't have enough of its own pitching to make Georgia pay for it. So I think if that's a team that has a little more depth on the mound, has a little more high-end quality on the mound, I think we would have gotten a different result this weekend. As it was, I think Kentucky should probably feel pretty good about, hey, we got to win against a top 5 team. That's going to be one of our more difficult series this season, or at least on paper it is. So I'm not saying they should go away dejected about it, but it does feel like there was an opportunity here for Kentucky, especially in the game, Friday's game where they were up 6-2, something along those lines, and then just couldn't hold on to it. But I came away with Georgia thinking, man, like they've got some issues to straighten out, or else, they're going to get got by one of these really, really high end teams that goes into Foley Field and is going to be able to do enough on the mound to kind of, make them pay for not having polish on the mound in their own, in their own right. Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing with Georgia. I mean, their offense is just fearsome. I mean, especially at home, but the question will be what it look like outside of Foley Field. I think it's going to be really fearsome. It may not hit quite as many home runs, but it's versatile enough that they're going to do a lot, score a lot of runs. The question is all on the mound, and there's no shortage of velocity. There's no shortage of guys, but the pitchability is just not there right now. And the day I was there, Hoskins hit 99 on his first pitch and got 100, hit 100 later in the inning, but he also walked 2 and hit 2 and gave up bunch of runs. And then they follow him with Stevens, and he hits 98 and then hits 99. Right. But he also, just wasn't effective. He throws hard, but it just wasn't, it didn't click. And so that's the question for them is, no one's questioning their offense. They're going to score a lot. It's just, what does it look like when maybe somebody can hold you down? Because eventually that's going to happen, especially on the road. And they go to Florida next week, and Florida's going to be kind of ticked off. So that'll be fascinating to see how that Georgia offense they got dudes up and down the lineup, hit the ball out of the park, and steal bags and take hit by pitches and all those other things as well. They can score different ways, but what's it going to look like away from home? I do feel like that's a team, if they can figure it out on the mound, and certainly who are we to doubt Wes? I mean, he's got an incredible track record. Odds are he's going to figure it out. That's a team that can win it all. But if they don't figure it out on the mound, they're going to lose in a regional because as the competition gets better. So I just, it's early. You don't have to have all the answers yet, but it was really, it's a fascinating watch, just seeing what they look like um, and and also just understanding how that team fits that ballpark so well. I mean, because it's a lot of fly balls, but they also stand on top of the plate. They also get a lot of free runners. They'll move runners. They do other things other than hit fly balls that go over the wall. So it's a versatile offense, but it really plays well at Foley.
Yeah, 100%. And that's to their credit. I think sometimes it's
Mhm.
easy to discredit a team like that because it's like, oh, you're, playing in a little league park or whatever it is.
Right.
Like, and sure, like you do get some relatively soft home runs at Foley Field, but they recruit to the ballpark. They know how to use the ballpark. It is what it is, So yeah, I think that's to their credit. On the Kentucky side, I mentioned that, like, I actually think there were some good things here.
Offensively, really. I mean,
Yeah.
I like their offense. I think they're going to score. And I know we bagged on Georgia, but some of that was Kentucky. So I feel like that, that's an offense, and they've got a system in place, right? And they're just plugging and play. If they get enough pitching, and I'd like to see what their pitching looks like. Oh, not playing Georgia, not playing in Foley Field, and we'll get a better evaluation of them. But I was kind of impressed with Kentucky. I mean, I think they're a regional team. I feel like they're going to be in the hunt. I don't think they're going to challenge for the league title like they did last year, but they lost so much. But I do feel like they're capable of beating anybody. And the question will be, they could also probably lose to anybody. So, in the SEC. So it's just how are they going to win enough close games so that the numbers work in their favor?
Yeah, I'm with you on all accounts. I think individually, offensively, like I think Patrick Herrera might be turning into a star.
Yeah,
I really like the way
Yeah.
I really like the way he controls the bat. Like, it's a ton of walks, not very many strikeouts. He's a good runner. He's 5 for 5 in stolen bases. Not gonna be a guy that has a ton of pop, but that's okay. Like, that's not what they're asking him to do. Made an outstanding play defensively the day you were there, like a 5-3 double play where he from the ground threw a laser to first base.
It looked like a foul ball.
Yeah, just an incredible play.
Yeah,
go find that highlight if you haven't seen it. Like, it's an incredible play.
So you can find it.
Yeah, there you go. One of the better plays I've seen at the college level on the infield.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's kind of becoming a star. I think that's great because he's a guy that transferred in, played hardly at all the first year. And part of that, I believe, I remember, like, he had some sort of illness leading up to the season, so he just never quite like had his strength, I guess. I think that was the case with him. My apologies if not, if I'm conflating two different players. And then last year he played kind of a bit role. Like, they'd bring him in to get a butt down. They'd bring him in to pinch run. They'd bring him in as a defensive replacement. But he had a role to play. And this year it looks like he's going to be a centerpiece to the whole deal for them. And I think that's a cool development story. Cole Hage, of course, keeps hitting the ball for Kentucky. Like, that guy looks like a star. He's up to 6 home runs now. He's stolen 9 bases. Like, there's just a lot to like there with him. My other big picture thing on this, Mark, before we move on, is, I saw a decent bit of the Friday game in this series, and it was a postage stamp strike zone. And I've heard from other people who have reached out to me on social media, there were other games where this was the case, and you and I are not able to see every pitch of every game, believe it or not. So, I don't know, but I just remember that game on Friday being like, Charlie Goldstein and Nick McKay had no shot, and you're trying to pitch in Foley Field, with the strike zone like that, forget it. Charlie Goldstein doesn't get out of the first, and yeah, he probably wasn't that sharp. I know he wasn't that sharp, but also like, he wasn't pitching so poorly that he shouldn't have gotten out of the first. Nick McKay ends up only going 2 and change for the same reasons. His pitch count was elevated, and he'd walk some guys, and like, Nick McKay throws a lot of strikes. So it's less about complaining about that one umpire, because I actually don't think it's a one umpire problem. I mean, yes, there are umpires that call smaller zones than others, but I think this is kind of like a systemic thing in terms of the strike zone getting called. And I think I don't want to say exclusive to the SEC, but I do think it is exacerbated in the SEC. Some of it is, I think, because the league cares about baseball so much, the umpires are being evaluated on a very harsh level. And that's great because you want the best umpires calling the games in the best conference in the country. So I am pro that generally. Let's make sure we have the best umpires on the field. You will get no argument from me on that. But I think an unintended consequence of that is that there's a little skittishness to call bigger zones. And I think this is kind of what we've got now. And this is not the first time this has come up. I think you and I probably had this exact conversation last year. But I think this year it's become a specific talking point again, because it's that combined with the fact that, oh yeah, once again, like there's, 15 elite offenses in the SEC. That's a little exaggeration, but you know what I mean. And exit velos are up again, and so there is a safety issue here where if you're forcing pitchers to throw it into a coffee can, middle, you're going to get line drives 115 miles an hour back at people. And that does become a safety issue at some point. So anyway, I'm going to throw it over to you now, but that is my kind of entree to, obviously we can't do anything right now. Like this is not a mid-season fix. But I do think there needs to be a larger dialogue about, for two reasons. One is just that like, it just doesn't feel like it's a reflection of where the game should be. And then second of all, I think it's just going to make for a more entertaining game if we let the pitchers pitch and get them some help, like, cause the pitchers in this version of the SEC, I'll say it, like, if you're Paul Skeens, great. You don't need any help. If you're Hagen Smith, great. You don't need any help. If you're Liam Doyle, you got it. But for the 99 other percent of the pitchers in the SEC, like they need help. Like this league is so offensive. Like there are good pitching staffs in this league that will have 5.5, 6 ERAs. And that's just the reality. And so I don't want to go back to 2013 where every game was 3-1. I don't want that at all. But I do wonder if there is a happy medium where if we call a bigger zone, maybe we'd have a little bit of mitigation of some of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you covered a lot of that.
I just singed Mark's eyebrows off with that.
Yeah, it's part of the whole deal of how do you evaluate umpires? Because you've got the whole robot umps thing, and you've got the automatic strike zone systems and all of those sorts of things. And I think most of us like the calls to be consistent. And I think that's, if it's consistently small or consistently large, usually you can adjust. I think the inconsistency is what drives people crazy. But everything's got its limits. And, the example you're talking about where the zone was just small for both teams. And I do think with the way offense is right now, we can have a larger strike zone. I mean, it's certainly tilted towards offense. That's why the shift isn't banned, because there's already so much offense. You ban the shift, then all your pull hitters are going to continue to, they're going to get extra hits, right? So it's, I feel like that the path forward here is to evaluate your umpires. You give them clear direction on what you want, what you want your zone to be, hitter zone, pitcher zone, you want it high, low, whatever your dimensions are preferred at that level. And then everybody does it, right? And you don't have, this umpire's got a tight zone, this umpire's got a loose zone, whatever. I do think that consistency is the key, and that's, we've all seen it, right? That's the most frustrating part of the game is, what's a strike to my team is a ball to the other team, and that's what it just drives people nuts, drives us nuts, right? And even if we don't care who wins, you don't want to see that. So I feel like that's, how do you fix that? It's an age-old problem, but technology's here now. I mean, it's never been stronger. We've got all these different systems that can see the video and go back and critique people. And that's how you get better, right? If you don't know you have a problem, then you're not going to fix it. And certainly people can be aware, maybe problem's not the right word, but certainly, hey, you had a small zone this week. Let's keep that in mind next week. And I feel like those are the decisions I hope are happening. And we'll see how that transpires as the year goes on.
Yeah, I think part of the reason, as you were talking there, a thought came to my mind. I think part of the reason why I'm sound passionate about this is not that I'm certainly not angry about it, but I think part of the reason why I'm passionate about this is because what I fear, I guess, is that the game is going to get offensive enough that we're going to start tinkering with equipment again. And that's just annoying. Let's be honest. But also, like, we really messed up the game 10 years ago. More than, I guess it's been, well, yeah, I guess it was a little more than 10 years ago.
You couldn't hit a home run. Yeah.
We really messed up the game. Like, I just remember watching
was
games.
3 bunt singles. Right.
Yeah. Like, I just remember outfielders playing at slow pitch softball depth, like, and so it just, it got so extreme there that I just worry about trying to fix a problem and creating another one that's even worse. Right. And so like, I think if we can do some other mitigation strategies before we just start messing with the bats and balls again, maybe we can find some sort of other solution here. So we will leave that there, because obviously we're not fixing that today, but it is something that came up and thought it was worth bringing up, because also those games all took forever in Athens. And, when you score 27 total runs, that'll happen, but also it was because it was a lot of walks. And so it is. Okay. Oklahoma and South Carolina. Before I turned over to you, just like a gutsy series win for Oklahoma. Like, one of the truest things in the SEC is that you're going to have series where you just got to win ugly. And I know coaches don't care about that, but I'm just saying, like, there are games where it's like, there are a lot of things that did not go our way. And in this case with Oklahoma on Sunday, like, Cam Johnson faces 2 batters and got neither of them out. Right. And like, how do you win that game? It is kind of like something you have to solve for in the SEC, because you're going to have games like that. And so for Oklahoma to do that, I think is impressive. South Carolina also kicking itself, frankly, because you were there, you can tell us, but they probably should have won that game. So anyway, I came away impressed with Oklahoma's resolve today to get that game. And for South Carolina, I think it's a tough blow, because I don't want to call any series a must win in mid-March, because that's not true. But if you're South Carolina, it's a real missed opportunity to get a series win against a team that, at least on paper, I know Oklahoma is ranked, South Carolina is not, but at least on paper feels like two teams that are going to occupy, in South Carolina's at least most optimistic outlook, they're trying to occupy a similar space to where Oklahoma's at. You had a chance to get a big series win there and you just let it go.
Yeah. South Carolina blew multiple run leads on Sunday after holding Oklahoma to, I think they had 1 hit through 6 or something like that. I mean, it was falling into place for South Carolina to win that game, and then made some, we'll just say, difficult defensive miscues, missed some opportunities there. I think the other part of that is that they certainly had opportunities to stretch the lead out and weren't able to come through. But from an Oklahoma standpoint, they made the clutch plays and they kept fighting. They came through, and man, Dylan Crooks at the end of the game is just money. I had no idea that he was going to be this. I don't know if anybody did, but he was lights out at the end of the game, just competed his tail off. And if they've got a guy like him, which obviously it appears they do, at the end of the game to go with that, with a very talented, we'll see how productive they are and going forward, rotation, that, Oklahoma's going to be hard to score on. Now, the question for them all, that we've had is, what's the offense is almost totally rebuilt. What does it look like? And Jason Walk, for me, was a guy that was a lot better than I anticipated. He's their leadoff guy. He just stays on base. He draws walks, gets hits by pitch. He ended up hitting the home run. He got a lift from the wind. He basically hit what looked like a fly ball, and it just kept going. And that was the game that ended up the eventual game-winning run. But credit to him. I mean, he hit the ball hard enough to make that possible. And then Easton Carmichael, I really like him in the middle of that lineup. I mean, it's a clutch player, a veteran player. After that, though, it's a lot of mix and match, and they're going to play some different guys, and we're going to see, how all that pans out for the Sooners. But they that was big for them to come in SEC venue. You've been hearing the talk, for several years now about how are you going to do once you get to the SEC, and then you come in to and have some things don't go your way, and then you find a way to win the series. So that was, if you're Oklahoma, you're ecstatic. If you're South Carolina, you're kicking yourself thinking, man, we had it and we let it slip through our fingers.
Yeah, and we can call a spade. Like, you would not have heard this on the Highway to Hoover podcast, but had they lost that series to South Carolina, they would have been hearing from other fan bases on social media, I'm sure, like, oh, you couldn't even handle South Carolina? How are you going to be, insert other SEC team here?
Right.
We know that's not how it works. Right. You're never going to waltz into a road venue in the SEC and just expect to like win games just because you're on paper better. Like, that's not how this works. But by winning the series, they did kind of ward off some of that. Yeah, you're right. It's a good point. Like, they did kind of prove that point. I think both teams can come out with, I think both teams, we saw some vulnerabilities for both teams in the series, but I also think we saw some positives. I think Oklahoma getting the series win without really having their running game going, 2 for 5 in stolen bases over the weekend. So well done by mostly the South Carolina pitchers for holding runners pretty well. So that was big. So I came away impressed with the fact that Oklahoma didn't have arguably its biggest weapon, which is its speed and aggressiveness on the bases. It didn't really have that, and yet won the series. I think that's a huge deal. So I think there's that. On the vulnerable side for Oklahoma, though, Cam Johnson was sick on Sunday. So let's just assume that that's kind of like a one-off deal there, but Malachi Witherspoon didn't pitch all that well. So, it's back to the question of like, was that a one-off, or is it going to be a situation where you feel great about Kyson on Fridays and then the next 2 days are a little bit of like coin flips?
It's week to week.
Right. So there's that. With South Carolina, I thought Henry Kazmar got going, which is huge because I think we kind of assumed we knew what we were going to get from him, going into the year. And it just hasn't been that, for him at South Carolina the first 4 weeks of the season. So to get him going was huge. But I think we saw that they just weren't able to, for South Carolina, we had questions about their offense. And I think we saw it again this weekend. It's not that they scored some runs every day, but they just couldn't land a knockout punch, and you would just like for especially in Sunday's game where they had opportunities to put the game away and they just never could. Like I was listening to a lot of the game when I was in the car. I was doing a TV game today and driving back, and it just felt like there were a couple of instances where they had the bases loaded. And I think actually this happened twice. Like they got a run scoring hit by pitch and then the next batter got out. And so it was a situation where it's like, that could have been a lot worse. You got gifted a run. Yes. But a ball in the gap would have totally changed this game. Right. And so they just couldn't land. Like they had Oklahoma like staggering around, and like they just couldn't, hit that, maybe that big uppercut, like the Buster Douglas uppercut on Mike Tyson in that fight in Tokyo. It just kind of is like, whoa, it didn't come. And so if you're concerned about the Carolina offense, and I think a lot of people are, that I think could be looked at as a little concerning. But fun series though. Like generally speaking, fun series. Like I thought that was just a good showcase for those two teams.
And today was good. I mean, it went 10 innings. The last inning, maybe last couple innings were played in driving rain, and it was tied, and then Oklahoma would lead, and then you think, are they going to stop it and with the run not count, because you go back to the last inning completed. So it was all this, with the home team, hey, we can't play, it's too bad, let's revert back to before that run scored, all those kinds of things. And we were having some fun with that in the press box. All the conspiracy theories that would fire up if that happened, but it was a really compelling game, tight played. There were some mistakes, but they were effort mistakes, right? So it was a good day at the park.
All right, we're going to move on to the stuff that Mark was not at personally, but a lot of interesting stuff elsewhere in the league. Before we get to any of that, though, one more quick ad break for our other sponsor here on Highway to Hoover, and that's Tecovas Boots. Whether it's the leather in your glove or your tailgating chairs, baseball people know that quality matters. That's why we love Tecovas Boots. Born in Texas, just like yours truly, handcrafted with over 200 meticulous steps and comfortable from day one, they're perfect for wherever the college baseball season takes you. From road trips to rivalry games, post-game celebrations, or just everyday wear, Tecovas boots are made to go the distance. Find your perfect pair today at Tecovas. Speaking of the state of Texas, Mark, let's talk about Alabama and Texas A&M. I'm going to lob this over to you because you might have more than I do on this. My thing is Texas A&M stinks. Like, I don't know if they're going to stink the rest of the season, but they stink right now. Like, there's no other way to put it. They lose 2-0 today to Alabama's Sunday pitching, and I don't mean that disrespectfully to Alabama's Sunday pitchers, but this was supposed to be the best offense in the country. And yes, you don't have Gavin Grohovac. Yes, Hayden Schott is banged up. Yada, 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 yada down the line. Still, like, this was supposed to be the most talented offense in the country, and clearly we were wrong about that.
Yeah.
That happens, but still, right? Like, it's all these caveats, but still. Yeah, like losing a 2-0 game on a Sunday is just so. I don't know if you have more than that. I mean, we'll talk more about it. We're not just going to leave it at that. But I don't know if you have something more profound than that on this sweep for Alabama over Texas A&M.
Well, I was kind of thinking about that. I actually wrote it in this morning's dish on Sunday morning. How much of this is Alabama? Because you want to give them credit for having a good weekend. How much of this is just A&M can't get out of their own way right now? And it's probably some of both, but I really feel like if you're Alabama, you took advantage of it, right? Because if A&M figures it out, you're going to look back on a missed opportunity, right? Hey, we could have this high-profile win against a team that now looks a lot better. They pull like Florida last year, LSU, or Tennessee the year before that started kind of poorly in conference play. I like that Alabama was able to do that, but if you're A&M, dude, I mean, this was supposed to be a super team. You had a ton of guys coming back, and you went out and brought in hired guns to make you even better. And it's just, I mean, pitching wise, it's great. I mean, they're doing what they need to, but offensively, they are lost. And what makes it worse is your former coach is over at Texas now, and that offense looks like yours last year, right? I mean, it's certainly more reminiscent of it than what we're seeing out of College Station, and that makes it even harder to stomach. I mean, it's really just baffling how players have regressed. And now you wonder what's next. One, if you're A&M, how do you fix it? Can you fix it? And if you can't, what happens? Because this is unacceptable. What's going on right now? Now with this kind of expectations, this kind of payroll, it's a new world, right? We're paying players, so that raises the expectations if you don't perform. It's in a rough spot. I will see A&M Thursday night in Nashville as part of this trip I'm doing. Excited just to kind of see the vibe, see what they're like. What's their energy level like? All those kinds of things that are important in a long season to withstand highs and lows. They've already had a ton of lows and didn't expect to have any, right? Or very few. So it's one of the more confusing teams that I can recall. I mean, someone that's supposed to be the preseason number one, who it's not just that they're losing games. Everybody loses games. It's just how offensively, which was their strength, it's a weakness. And and no one can, or at least I haven't heard anyone articulate, exactly what's going on. I guess they knew they'd fix it, but Yeah, it's, again, I don't want to take anything away from Alabama, who went in and took care of business, got a road sweep. I mean, it's hard to sweep Missouri, right? And we bang on Missouri, for not being great at times. So that's hard to do. So, congrats. I think that's really big for Rob Vaughn. It's really big for that pitching staff to get a lot of confidence and to get those clutch hits, the clutch home runs late in games to be able to come up. I mean, that's a huge momentum builder. I mean, they've got Tennessee next weekend. Hopefully they'll pack Sewell Thomas and have a good crowd for that. Although basketball will be going on, so probably not. But I do feel like, this is an opportunity for them to really elevate as a program after a series win like this, where everybody's going to be talking about them.
Yeah, I think it's a good point about, you get that sweep and it feels like you're already in a house money situation where, we talk about the math of the SEC schedule all the time. Maybe it's a little different this year because we're now at 16 SEC teams, but up to this point, you need 13 wins to be on the bubble. You need 16 wins to be discussed as a host. And obviously there's, better than everybody, like there's caveats to all this stuff, but we just understand how the math works. And so now you're in a situation with Alabama where it's like, you're going to welcome the number one team in the country to your place this weekend. And if you lose the series, but you get a game, you're 4-2 coming out of A&M and Tennessee. And you're like, hey man, like, that's great.
Like taken that before the season started. They would have
signed up 10 out of 10 times for that.
Yep.
So, it does make the math a little more favorable. And the big hits, Brennan Norton's home run, Cade Snell's home run, the Will Hodo grand slam, kind of a gutsy effort this weekend from Justin LeBron, who was ill on Friday, came back and played the next day and had 3 hits. So unless he just magically felt 100% better, he probably still didn't feel great. And I'm pretty useless when I'm really sick. I can't imagine going out there and getting 3 hits in an SEC game,
including the homer.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So just Riley Quick was impressive. Like he continues to get a little better each time out. That I think that's something they should feel really good about. And I'll leave you with a couple damning stats here. Alabama batted 243 for the weekend and swept. The 7 home runs helped. They did have 7 home runs as a team. A&M batted 200 and had 3 extra base hits all weekend. 3 extra base hits. Like that's just not going to do it. Yeah. And 2 of the 3 were doubles, so like, it's just, that's just not going to get it done. And that it goes without saying. So yeah, definitely. I mean, it's been beyond soul searching time for A&M. Somebody made a good point commenting on weekend waypoints that, I mean, the conference record is going to be one thing, but for whatever level they want to get to this season, like some of those non-conference games where they kind of, those could come back to hurt them, a la Mississippi State last year, right? Where, let's say A&M gets back in this conversation, like they get hot, they figure it out, whatever.
Right.
Like, is their RPI? We don't need to talk about it now, but is their RPI going to sag a little bit just because they took on some water early on, and we don't know how good Cal Poly will be, or whoever, right? Yeah. So something to think about there. Okay, staying in the state of Texas, or at least a team in the state of Texas, because this was not played in the state of Texas, but another sweep. Texas sweeps Mississippi State on the road. That is quite the entree into the SEC for Texas. Texas and Oklahoma 5-1 this weekend, opening SEC play. So good stuff from them. Yeah, Texas pitched well. I think that's like the biggest story there, especially in a situation today where 2 7-inning doubleheaders I think helped Texas. Because I think State's pitching, I know State's pitching depth is just better than where Texas's is. So I think having to play 14 innings instead of 18 in the last 2 games of the series, I think was helpful for Texas, and they took advantage of it. But even outside of that, they just pitched well, and State didn't get a lot from its starters. And I think to me, there were other little things within that, but I think those are kind of the 2 polarities of it, is that Texas got really good stuff from their pitchers, and State ended up having to throw a lot of bullpen innings, and Texas was able to do just enough. It's not like Texas scored 15 runs a game, but they were able to do just enough.
Yeah. I mean, what a debut. I think that's where when you hire Jim Schlossnagle, this is what you have in mind. You hit the SEC running, and you understand how to navigate these difficult road environments. And I mean that for them to get a sweep at Mississippi State, that's a talented team. I mean, it sets up an incredible week 2. You're gonna open the SEC home slate against LSU next weekend. Texas will. That will be, it's everything you want, right? Maybe later in the year, so you have guaranteed better weather, but otherwise, I mean, it's an event. But then if you're Mississippi State, you've already kind of got this bugaboo about beating the good teams and losing. You did beat Southern Miss, you split with them, but losing to everybody else, losing to the good teams. This is not going to help that. I didn't see anything today, so I still got to catch up on that and see how Sunday transpired. But it's troubling to me that with all of those great pitchers and great stuff on the staff, that they're still struggling to find the right pieces and put them in. Maybe you have too many guys, right? I don't know. I don't pretend to know. Like I said, I didn't see today, but it's Mississippi State's a team, like we're talking about with A&M, that if they figure it out, the sky's the limit. They've just got to find out whatever's missing right now, because I got to imagine that's a pretty down fan base after getting swept at home in the SEC opener. And then going to Houston and losing 2 out of 3, and the only win is to Rice, right? So that's troubling, and I do feel like that. I mean, it's kind of host or bust in that fan base, and this is definitely a setback. If you're going to drop 3 at home, then you got to make that up, and that means going on the road and winning some series you shouldn't, or sweeping somebody that you didn't expect to. So it's not going to be an easy week for the folks in Starkville, and they go to Oklahoma next weekend. I'll actually see that. I was part of my trip on Saturday. It'll be interesting to see just kind of their Mississippi State's vibe, right? Where they are, they bounce back. And it's just one weekend. Everybody has bad weekends. You can certainly overcome it. It's just, how do you get there? And that'll be a real fascinating part of this early season.
Yeah, I think it's such a good point about just that, the Mississippi State program is what it is, to where you get swept on opening weekend of SEC play. And I feel like even losing 2 of 3 would be a different vibe. But because you start 0-3, it does create a little bit of this spotlight on whoa, here we go. And you and I talked about it all offseason, that like that regional appearance last year, as much as everyone was aggrieved, and they have, I think, a fair argument at least. We can, we're not going to relitigate that, but they could have easily hosted last year, and by a lot of measures, maybe should have hosted, yada yada. But ultimately, they just got to regionals, played well there, but just made it to regionals. Like that doesn't really buy you much, Right. I don't think it convinced a lot of anybody who was disenfranchised by how the previous 2 seasons had gone. Probably didn't necessarily totally change their mind based on last season. So, and I'm not saying that this season is all about kind of like kowtowing to aggrieved fans, but it does create a pressure cooker. That's just the reality of it. So that will be a thing to watch. And I'm interested to see it, away from home, because the other thing about it is that, like, this is a sweep at home. So we talk about the math, and like that's obviously working in the opposite direction for Mississippi State. And speaking of Mississippi schools, kind of a wild series between Arkansas and Ole Miss this weekend. You talk about needing to win games ugly. And we can kind of take this in a couple directions. I'll set the table with this, Mark. I come out of this weekend feeling better about both offenses than I did like at the start of the season.
Yeah.
And being more nervous about the pitching staffs. And I guess with Ole Miss, it's more of like a push, because I did have questions about the pitching staff coming into the season, but I think Hunter Elliott did a nice job. And then Mason Nichols was actually really good today, Sunday.
Yeah.
Tough start for Riley Maddox, but that's, we just understand that he's different, where he's more hittable than the other two. So I think that's just going to happen sometimes. But the offenses, I thought, both performed pretty well. Ole Miss poured it on Friday, like kept adding on. I thought that was impressive.
Yeah.
Both offenses performed well today on Sunday, and Arkansas just got the last big hit. They were down a run headed to the ninth. They got a RBI single by Charles Davalon, and then Vahila Aloy, like who else but an Aloy brother, with a 3-run home run to give Arkansas the 3-run lead. So just a wild game there. But 16 hits for Arkansas's offense, 10 hits for Ole Miss's offense. Like I just kind of come away pretty optimistic about those two, probably more so Arkansas. And that's easy to say because they won the series, but I think more so Arkansas, but both really. I have a more positive impression than I did just a couple of weeks ago.
Well, I think there's a couple of things that maybe you didn't cover that I will. So I guess the first thing is Ole Miss. It was kind of a proof of concept. Yeah, you lost the series, but you battled toe-to-toe with the number 3 team in the country. If you can play with them, you can play with anybody. So it was, for me, that was I didn't know how this weekend was going to go. When I saw Ole Miss, they were not good. But it was the worst game they played. So the question was, how would it look? And it looked offensively, they hit what some of us call the best rotation in the country, and made them look kind of normal and ordinary, and at times worse than that. So if you're Ole Miss, even though you lost the series, you kind of wish you'd have found a way to get that one today. I'm still okay. I feel like this was all right. If you're Arkansas, you're wondering about your starters and your pitching in general. This was supposed to be the strength of the team, and in fact, such a strength that it overshadowed the offense and had us all questioning the offense. Right? Well, not us, but a lot of people questioning the offense. And the offense is the strength right now. They're hitting the ball all over the park. They're hitting for power. They're hitting doubles. They're getting clutch hits. Check, 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 check. Right. And now the question is, that great deep pitching staff, where are you? And so that's going to be, the next part of this is trying to, was it just one weekend? Was it, just hitters conditions in Oxford? I don't know. Right? But I do feel like Arkansas is better than they pitched this weekend. So, where do they get? They've got South Carolina next. I'll see that Sunday. That'll be the finale of my trip. It'll be interesting to see where Arkansas is, because by Sunday we may know a little bit more about where they are on the mound, and if they return to where we expected them to be, as one of the best pitching staffs in the country, certainly one of the deepest, most talented, they'll be great. They'll be one of the best teams in the country. If not, and they've got to outscore you, then they're just kind of like a whole bunch of other teams in this conference. And it doesn't mean they can't win, but it just means it's going to be a whole lot harder, because you're not going to have that advantage that we felt you would.
Yeah, that's my big thing with Arkansas coming out of the weekend is just, you're down Gage Wood. So that's one thing. Gabe Gackle was better in some ways this weekend. He missed more bats. So there's that, but he's still not getting deep into games. He's still not controlling the game. But the game doesn't feel like it's being played on his terms necessarily. And then, Beidelshees didn't pitch particularly well in the finale. And Zach Root just got like the got,
Murdered.
Ole Miss put on a laser show around him. So, and that's jarring. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens next weekend, because it feels like it's on a week to week basis now that we just are kind of monitoring this. So we'll keep our eyes there, but a good, a good gutsy, again, another gutsy series win where it's just like, hey, you don't have to apologize for the wins, especially with your offense swinging it like you are, and it's another road series win, and you'll take it. You move on with it. Vanderbilt, Auburn, next series on the list here. Auburn with a great comeback victory on Sunday to clinch that home series win. Doing so without Ike Irish, I think, impressive stuff. And I said that going into the weekend, that the little secret they have is that it's not like Irish has really been swinging the bat that well to this point. So they've kind of been doing it, I don't say without him, but without typical Irish. So that's the thing there. And I think they really have something with Sam Dutton. Now, Vanderbilt helped him on Friday a little bit. I talked about this stat on Weekend Waypoints, where Vanderbilt on Friday struck out 11 times and had 11 ground ball outs. So 22 of the 27 outs were on the ground or a strikeout, and that's just not going to do it. But I think Sam Dutton is a really good story. It's a guy who was at LSU and just was there at the wrong time. How were you going to, as Sam Dutton, a guy that LSU liked, like LSU, they gave him a lot of opportunities, and Sam Dutton pitched pretty well, like for the most part, but there just weren't opportunities for him to be a rotation guy at LSU. And so he gets an opportunity at Auburn, and he's really taken advantage of it. So I think that's a great story and a positive story of the transfer portal. I mean, I guess if you're LSU, it might be nice to have another arm, but I sense LSU is going to be fine on the mound. But so a cool deal there. But again, like Auburn to get this series win, I think huge, considering missing your best player, and still, let's be honest, trying to figure out some things on the mound, right? So they overcome those things and get a really quality series win.
Yeah. So Aaron was there today. He got to see the great comeback for Auburn. I feel like, that's the kind of win that young teams, especially teams that weren't successful in the prior season, that matter, that they can build on, and that they're going to be able to look back in May, and when they fall behind, which inevitably, everyone's going to go through that, and it's going to resonate. And when you have a young, talented team like that, for them to go into SEC play and to have success, I think those are the kinds of moments that you're going to look back on. And so, while it's only one game and it swings it from a 1-2 record to a 2-1 record, I felt like that was a really important game to take for Auburn. Where Vanderbilt, sure, it hurts, but I feel like they're going to be fine. They played well enough to win. It was really one pitch for the grand slam. You make a different pitch and you win the game, by 3 runs, right? So it's just, so you were really close. And again, you got to feel like you let one get away, like we talked about with South Carolina. But I felt like it was bigger for Auburn at home with all those young players and trying to build something than it was for Vandy. Now Vandy's got A&M coming up next week, and they need to kick the dog while it's down, and take care of business at home against A&M. So, but yeah, sound like an incredible moment for a kid that I think we're all pulling for, and Cade Ballou. So I feel like that's if somebody was going to have a great moment this weekend, he's near the top of my list.
I feel like, for the record, we should say Mark is using a metaphor. He is not advocating kicking dogs in any way, shape, or form. Just he did not mean that. He did not mean that in any actionable way. I can assure you, listeners.
Yeah,
that's right. Big swing for Cade Ballou in that game. It must have been really cool, Aaron, to be in the stadium for that moment, because I'm sure that the roof just blew off the place. Had their if there was a roof on Plainsman, newly renovated Plainsman Park. Yeah, just a cool deal there. Cody Bowker, if you're looking positives, Vanderbilt, Cody Bowker continues to pitch really well. Like it's a guy who I just think I underestimated, frankly. He continues to show a higher ceiling than what I thought he had. I'm interested to see more as time goes on there. I think with Auburn, got to figure out what we're doing with Cade Fisher. Maybe the idea has always kind of been, whether it's a physical thing or something else, maybe the idea has always been it's an opener. So that could be. Maybe the Auburn beat, the local guys have talked about this and I've just missed it. But so maybe it's that, but if it's not, I do think at some point relatively soon, there's going to be a conversation about, do we start Cam Tilly? Do we, move midweek guy to the do we move Andres Alvarez to the weekend rotation? Do we start Parker Carlson? Do we do something different? Because right now it feels like it's hamstringing Auburn a little bit, because it's not like Fisher's throwing 2 clean innings and getting out of there. Like he's giving up runs in his outings, and you just wonder how much longer they're going to be willing to do that before they feel like they need to make a change.
Yeah, it's a good point. And, he was brought in to be the guy, right? And be their Friday guy. And Dutton he's exceeded expectations, and Fisher, and there's been some injury stuff, but you just not, there's not an ROI there. Okay. And I feel like he can still get there and be that dependable starter, or even if he's, maybe his best role is as a reliever, as he was as a freshman at Florida. He was just so good in that role. But in Florida, tried him both ways last year with mixed success. So certainly he can help you. It's just trying to find, what role that's going to be in, and how do you get him there.
Final series, talk about LSU, Missouri. LSU sweeps it, but I gotta admit, like, Missouri did more damage than I thought. Very easily could have won the middle game of the series. They were, I don't want to say they were in every game. That's probably not quite accurate, but they were feistier offensively. And I said this during the week, like, I think this Missouri lineup is better. Now that's a low bar, admittedly, but I do think it's better. They're hitting basically 300 as a team. They showed some pop this weekend. Shout out to Keegan Knutson, a guy who, and I covered Missouri in the fall, and I got very little on that guy. He hit 2 home runs in the Saturday game to kind of make that a really close game. And they competed well. And I think this is a deal where it's like, let this be a lesson to every other SEC team. Like, you're not just going to, especially if you're going to Taylor Stadium, like, you're not just going to waltz in there and roll over them because they haven't been good. Like, you have to earn the wins, and LSU did, to their credit. Again, another team, though, where it's like, do you look at what happened over the weekend to their starting pitchers, and is it just that, hey, you know what, tough weekend. It was maybe hard to motivate for Missouri, but I don't know if you could motivate for their non-conference games. I don't know why you couldn't motivate for Mizzou, but was it that? Was it something else? Did Mizzou just have a really good game plan? There's a lot of questions that could be asked, but either way, I mean, the performances among their starting pitchers are not going to be good enough against basically every other team they come across every weekend here forward.
Yeah. I mean, I think the key for Missouri is they've got to avoid the big knockout punches. I mean, they've got to just hang around and then seize the opportunity when it's there. And that almost happened in the Saturday game. It was a 1-run game, and I'm blanking on the reliever who came in and put up 3 donuts there to just keep them in it. And
Caden Jacoby.
Yeah. And they just needed that, that rally in the ninth to make it happen. And I think that's the formula. And at home, I think they're going to get somebody, may get multiple somebodies. It's just a question of, can you keep your mojo going while you're continuing to lose series week after week. Now, if you're LSU, you avoided it. You just needed to escape 3-0. You had people we're going to give you no credit for beating Missouri. And if you happen to lose one, you were going to be pillared. Okay, so you escaped it, and now you got to go to Texas, and that'll be the highlight series. Maybe
It'll be
cross
harder.
country. Yeah, it will be. I can assure you it will be. So that'll be great. And see what LSU's still playing a lot of playing with the lineup, different guys in different places. Even the starters didn't go as deep this week. So just trying to understand what those roles are going to be. What do you do with Schmidt? What do you do with Ware? Just when Gavin Guidry returns, what's his role? All of these kind of things we still don't know, and we may not know for a while as LSU just kind of tries to be, because as much as you want to win games now, the more important thing is to be really good in June, and I think you may see some kind of head scratching things right now, and that's what Jay's trying to do is trying to put his team in a position where they can grow so that they're better later.
Two quick things, then we'll get out of here because we're almost an hour and 15 minutes into this deal, which this weekend deserved it, right?
Yeah.
So like that's not a complaint. There's a lot to talk about, but shout out to Michael Braswell. Like honestly, hasn't been playing that much, and then he gets a start. I don't want to say not playing that much, like that's not quite accurate, but last year he played every single day, and this year had not been that. And gets 3 starts, hits the ball well, so for a guy who was so much a part of last year's team and overachieved at least my expectations, and I feel like a lot of people's expectations last year, to be accepting of, hey, you know what, I'm going to be a not part-time, but platoon guy this year maybe, and that just to be the reality, like that's not always easy to do, and it seems like he's accepted that and has done well at it. The other thing is, I've just run out of words to talk about how good Derek Curiel is. And so I'm just going to have to leave it there because like the dude is just really good. Like there's going to be lots of competition for SEC Freshman of the Year this year. Tennessee's got guys, and actually I'm just not going to start naming guys. I'm going to forget somebody and people are going to get mad at me. But Derek Curiel is if not the favorite, he is in a small handful of favorites for that award so far this season. So another good weekend for him. He batted, 455 for the weekend, 5 for 11. So didn't strike out once over the weekend. And, against any team that's impressive, against an SEC pitching staff, even more impressive. So, he continues to be a really, really impressive freshman. All right, Mark, quickly, what games do you have coming up this week? Because I think there's people who are kind of interested in just kind of generally following where you're at. Yeah. So give us the quick table setting for where you're going to be.
So on Tuesday, I'll be at Rickwood Field. There's a day game between UAB and Troy. And when it wraps, I will hop on the interstate and head down to Tuscaloosa, where we'll see Alabama and South Alabama. That's a 6 o'clock start. So hopefully weather, traffic, everything cooperates, and I can do the doubleheader in 2 cities. Wednesday, I'll head to Nashville. I'll see Memphis and Lipscomb on Wednesday. It's a 4 o'clock start. And then Thursday, and I'll stay in Nashville for Thursday to see Texas A&M and Vandy, which, when I planned this trip, I thought it was going to be, the top-ranked Aggies and, maybe a top 10 Vanderbilt team. And it's not going to be that, but it'll still be there's plenty of storylines. And no shortage of that. Then Friday, I will be in Austin for the LSU Texas game 1. Really fired up about that one. And then Saturday, driving to Norman to see Oklahoma take on Mississippi State. That also will be really good. It's my first trip to Norman as well, so excited about that. And then Sunday, I'll head over to Fayetteville and see the Hogs against South Carolina and see where Arkansas is at that point, and then stay there Sunday night and fly home Monday, and that will complete this circuit that's been a lot of fun so far. 3 days into it.
Rest in peace to Mark's back and neck.
It's killing me. It's already killing me.
Yeah, I'm super jealous of the Rickwood game. I think I said that last episode. For those who don't know, like Rickwood Field is the oldest baseball stadium in America, still in use. Cool deal. They're doing that game during the day, so you can do the little doubleheader. That is very nice of them to roll out the red carpet in that way for you. But definitely jealous. I'm sure I'll have my opportunities to get to Rickwood at some point, but I'm definitely jealous of that. So if you see Mark out and about, especially in Norman, for the Oklahoma fans listening, if you see Mark in Norman, give him your recommendations for, things he should eat, primarily things he should eat, because that's what we care most about. But, just how to best get the most out of his Norman experience. And that goes for every stadium. If you see Mark out and about, same goes for me. If you see us, say hello. Don't be weird, but just say hello.
Yeah. And we had some come up in all three stadiums this week. Somebody comes up and introduces themselves, and it's really a cool part of this gig where people recognize you, and you have no idea who they are, but they know everything about you. So it's takes some getting used to, but it's always cool to make a new friend.
No doubt. Yeah. Always. It is always weird being recognized, but I'm always appreciative because everyone universally has nice things to say. And I know you folks listening, you folks reading us don't always agree with us, don't always like some of the things we say. That's the nature of the business, but we do appreciate, you following along, and genuinely, when you come up to say hello, I always find it to be a cool deal. And I just like to talk ball. So come up and, just say hello if you see us out and about. That is just true across the board. All right, folks, that is going to do it for this edition of the Highway to Hoover podcast, a production of SEC Extra over at d1baseball.com. Thank you to our sponsors for this and every episode of Highway to Hoover, Academy Sports and Outdoors, and Tecovas Boots. Thank you, Mark, for joining me as always. Thank you, the listeners, for listening. We'll talk to y'all soon.